When I arrived at the restaurant for my daughter's wedding, her groom rolled his eyes and muttered, "Oh no, that old man is here again." But then his father's eyes widened and he whispered, "Is it really him?" All the waiters hid in the shadows and the guests were stunned. They finally understood who I really was. And that day became not just my daughter's wedding day, but the day justice prevailed. It had all begun 3 months earlier in my home in San Francisco. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled my kitchen as I carefully brushed olive oil over the rack of lamb. After 30 years as a food critic, I could prepare this dish with my eyes closed, but tonight demanded perfection. Claire, my only daughter, was bringing home her boyfriend for the first time. I glanced at the kitchen clock, still 2 hours before they would arrive. Perfect timing for the slow roast and resting period. The vegetables were already prepped and waiting, a colorful array of heirloom carrots, parsnips, and Brussels sprouts that would complement the lamb perfectly. A bottle of 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon breathed on the counter, selected from my modest but carefully curated wine collection. My phone chirped with another notification. I wiped my hands and checked the screen. Another comment on my latest restaurant review for the San Francisco Chronicle. The reader praised my unflinching honesty and poetic descriptions of an overpriced downtown steakhouse that had failed to live up to its reputation. I smiled, then quickly closed the browser and tucked the phone away. Claire didn't know about my work, or rather, she knew I wrote for the Chronicle, but believed I covered local politics and community events. She had no idea that the city's most feared food critic, who published under the simple byline AR, was her 62-year-old father, Anthony Reynolds. I kept this secret for good reasons. When people discovered my profession, dinner invitations became anxiety-inducing events for hosts. Friends would apologize for every perceived flaw in their cooking. Restaurants would either refuse to serve me or roll out special treatment that prevented an honest assessment. I'd learned long ago that anonymity was essential to my work. The phone rang. Claire's name and smiling face appeared on the screen. "Hi, Dad. Just checking we're still on for tonight." "Of course, sweetheart. Everything's ready." I turned down the heat under a simmering sauce. "Great, Blake is really looking forward to meeting you." Her voice carried the excitement of new love. "We should be there around 7. Perfect timing. The lamb will be just right." "Lamb, Dad, you didn't have to go all out." "It's no trouble." I smiled, remembering how my late wife Elizabeth had taught me this recipe. She had been the real chef in the family, a culinary school graduate who had given up restaurant work to raise our daughter. After her death 5 years ago, cooking had become my connection to her memory. "Blake is bringing wine, so don't open anything fancy," Claire added. "Too late for that." I chuckled. "But we can compare bottles. How's work been?" Claire launched into a story about her latest marketing campaign. At 28, she had already risen to a senior position at her firm, her natural creativity and work ethic pushing her forward. I listened proudly as she detailed a particularly challenging client meeting she had salvaged. "Anyway, I should go. Blake's waiting in the car." She paused. "Dad, I really like this one. I think, I think he might be it." My heart skipped. Then I'm even more excited to meet him. After we hung up, I returned to my preparations with renewed purpose. Claire had dated several men over the years, but none she had described with such certainty. If this Blake was the one, then tonight mattered more than I had realized. I straightened the dining room and adjusting the place settings for the third time. My home was not extravagant, a Victorian in the Sunset District that Elizabeth and I had purchased 30 years ago when such things were still affordable in San Francisco. The hardwood floors showed their age, and the wallpaper in the hallway was perhaps a decade past its prime, but every corner held memories. Claire's height marks on the kitchen door frame, the dent in the living room wall from the time she tried to practice softball indoors, the reading nook where Elizabeth and I had spent countless evenings sharing books and dreams. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, took a deep breath, and moved to answer it. Through the beveled glass, I could make out two figures, my daughter's familiar silhouette, and beside her a taller form. I opened the door with a welcoming smile that faltered slightly as I took in the man standing beside Claire. Blake Sullivan was handsome in a conventional way, early 30s, with perfectly styled hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to being admired. He wore what I recognized as casual luxury clothing, pressed khaki pants, and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But it was his expression that caught my attention, the barely concealed assessment in his eyes as they swept over me, then past me to scan my home. "Dad, this is Blake." Claire beamed, seemingly oblivious to her boyfriend's calculating gaze. "Blake, this is my father, Anthony." Blake offered a firm handshake and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, sir. Claire has told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope." I stepped aside to welcome them in. "Please come in. Dinner's almost ready." "Interesting little place," Blake remarked, stepping into the foyer. His eyes traveled over the vintage wallpaper, the well-worn furniture, the family photos lining the hallway. "Bit old-fashioned, though, isn't it?" Claire shot him a quick warning glance that he either missed or ignored. "We like it here," I managed, forcing a smile. "Claire grew up in this house." "Dad has lived here forever," Claire added, kissing my cheek. "It has character, history. People of your generation usually don't understand current home design trends," Blake said with the casual dismissiveness of someone delivering what they believe to be an obvious truth. "Everything's smart homes and minimalism now." The words hit like a slap, delivered with such casual confidence that I almost missed their sting. Claire's face flushed pink. "Dad's been cooking all morning," she interjected quickly. "Come on, let's eat." I led them to the dining room where the table gleamed with my best dishes, cloth napkins folded just so. The aroma of roasted lamb and herbs filled the air. Blake settled into his chair like he was doing us a favor, immediately checking his phone. "I hope you're hungry," I said, retreating to the kitchen to retrieve the first course, a simple salad with pears, walnuts, and blue cheese. "Starving," Claire replied enthusiastically. Blake looked up from his phone. "Just a small portion for me. I have a very specific diet." I served the salad, then returned with the wine I'd selected. "I understand you brought a bottle as well." "Oh yes." Blake reached into a designer bag and produced a bottle with a flourish. 2018 Napa Valley Cabernet. My family's wine club gets an exclusive allocation. I examined the label, a mid-range wine from a commercial vineyard that produced thousands of bottles annually, marked up to 3 times its value for the exclusive club. Nothing exclusive about it. "Very nice," I lied politely. "Shall we open this one or the 2015 I have breathing?" "Let's go with mine," Blake said without hesitation. The 2018 was an exceptional year for that vineyard. It wasn't, but I nodded and opened his bottle. "So Blake," I began as I served the salad, "Claire tells me you work in finance." Blake took a small, careful bite of salad, then set his fork down. "Investment consulting, high-end portfolio management. Complex stuff that requires understanding market dynamics that, well, most people your age wouldn't grasp." Claire jumped in quickly. "Dad's very financially savvy, actually. He's always given me great advice about—" "I'm sure he has," Blake interrupted with a thin smile. "Different generations, different approaches. Nothing wrong with keeping things simple." Simple. As if my life's work was a child's lemonade stand. I watched him push food around his plate, taking tiny bites like he was afraid of contamination. The man my daughter loved couldn't even pretend to enjoy the meal I'd poured my heart into. "This house has such character," Claire said desperately, trying to steer conversation to safer ground. "The original crown molding the bay windows." Blake glanced at his watch. "Could use updating, though. These old places, you know, outdated electrical, probably asbestos in the walls. When we're married, we'll definitely want something more modern. Contemporary design, smart home features. When we're married, not if, as if my daughter's future was already decided, her childhood home already condemned." I refilled his water glass, though he hadn't asked. "Have you two thought about the wedding yet? Any ideas about venues?" Claire's eyes lit up. "We've been looking at the finest establishments in the city," Blake interrupted. "Money's no object, of course. We want something that reflects our status properly." "Our status?" I noticed he said "our," but looked only at me when he said it, as if establishing dominance over some imagined territory. The fog outside my windows was thickening, typical late afternoon San Francisco weather. Inside, the temperature seemed to be dropping too. I served the main course perfectly, medium rare lamb chops with rosemary, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. Blake took one look and frowned. "I usually avoid red meat these days," he said, cutting a tiny piece with surgical precision. "I can make you something else if you prefer," I offered. "No." No, this is fine. He took a small bite, then set his fork down. Just not what I'm used to. Claire's eyes darted between us, her earlier excitement replaced by growing tension. I felt a pang of guilt for not making more effort with this man she clearly cared about. For her sake, I tried again. So tell me about your family, Blake. Claire mentioned your father is in business as well. This finally sparked genuine animation in Blake's face. He straightened, chest puffing out slightly. My father owns Harrington's Prime, the finest restaurant in San Francisco. Five-star dining. We've hosted governors, tech executives, international dignitaries. My interest was immediately piqued. In 15 years of reviewing restaurants in San Francisco, I had never heard of Harrington's Prime. That sounds impressive, I said, genuinely curious. Whereabouts is it located? Downtown Financial District, corner of Montgomery and Bush. Pride radiated from every word. My father built that empire from nothing. Started with one small bistro 30 years ago. Now we're the premier fine dining destination in Northern California. Claire was shooting warning looks between us, but I pressed gently forward. Your father must be quite the businessman. How many employees does a place like that require? 47 full-time staff. Executive chef poached from New York. Sommelier trained in France. Host staff that speaks multiple languages. Each detail delivered like ammunition. The kitchen alone costs more to build than most people make in 5 years. And you're involved in the day-to-day operations. I handle the business, Shenbai, Blake replied. Financial planning, investment strategies, vendor negotiations. His earlier condescension was replaced by aggressive pride. Someone has to keep the book straight when you're running a multi-million-dollar operation. Multi-million-dollar, 47 employees, downtown real estate. The numbers were adding up in my head, creating a picture I found very interesting indeed. That's fascinating, I said. I imagine the overhead must be enormous. Rent in that area alone. Rent, Blake laughed, but there was an edge to it. We own the building, bought it outright in 2019. No bank loans, no investors. Claire beamed at me as if to say, see how impressive he is. I nodded thoughtfully. I'd love to try it sometime. Always looking for new dining experiences. Well, actually, Claire interjected, we've been meaning to tell you. She reached for Blake's hand, her face glowing. We're thinking of having the wedding reception there, at Harrington's Prime. Oh, I raised my eyebrows. That's wonderful. It's the obvious choice, Blake said dismissively. The venue will be my father's wedding gift to us. I served dessert, homemade apple pie, and watched Blake take one polite bite before abandoning it entirely. Well, he said, checking his phone again, I suppose we should discuss the practical details. Wedding planning, guest list, that sort of thing. His tone suggested we were planning a business merger rather than celebrating love. I looked at my daughter, still trying to keep conversation flowing, still trying to make this work. Her happiness mattered more than my bruised pride. But something cold was settling in my chest, a calculation beginning to form. This man saw us as obstacles to overcome problems, to solve outdated fixtures to be replaced. He'd made that clear enough. What he didn't know was that some old things have sharp edges when handled carelessly. The conversation shifted toward wedding venues now, Claire mentioning places she'd seen online. I know a wonderful restaurant for weddings, I said, clearing the last of the dinner plates. Reasonable prices, but excellent quality. The chef there does amazing work. Blake's fork clattered against his dessert plate. We're not beggars. The wedding will be at my father's restaurant, Harrington's Prime, the finest establishment in the city. His voice had jumped 2 octaves. Claire nearly spilled her coffee. Blake calmed down. Dad was just trying to help. Help? He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood. Your father thinks we need help finding a reasonable venue. Do you understand what kind of insult that is? I kept my voice level, curious. I apologize. I didn't realize your family was in the restaurant business. Not just any restaurant business. His chest puffed out like a rooster defending territory. Harrington's Prime, 5-star dining. The wedding industry calls us when they want true luxury. That sounds impressive, I said again. I'd love to visit sometime, see it for myself. You should, Blake said, calming slightly at the prospect of showing off his family legacy. I'll arrange a special table. VIP treatment. Claire smiled with relief as the tension eased. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it, Dad? Absolutely, I agreed. I look forward to it. The rest of the evening passed with forced pleasantries. Blake checked his watch repeatedly, making it clear he had better places to be. When they finally left, Claire hugged me tightly at the door. He's just nervous, she whispered. He really is wonderful once you get to know him. I kissed her forehead. I'm sure he is, sweetheart. After closing the door behind them, I returned to the kitchen and poured myself another glass of the 2015 Cabernet, the good one that Blake had dismissed. I opened my laptop and typed Harrington's Prime San Francisco into the search bar. The results were interesting. There was indeed a Harrington's Prime at Montgomery and Bush, but it was not the luxurious five-star establishment Blake had described. The restaurant's website was outdated, the few online reviews middling at best. There was no mention of a celebrity chef from New York or a sommelier trained in France. I dug deeper, checking restaurant licensing records, health department reports, tax filings. Harrington's Prime was real but modest, a mid-range steakhouse that had opened in 1995, not 30 years ago, as Blake had claimed. The owner was listed as Wayne Harrington, presumably Blake's father. There was no indication they owned the building. In fact, they had renewed a 5-year lease in 2020. I sat back, sipping my wine thoughtfully. Blake Sullivan had lied extensively and unnecessarily about his family's restaurant. The question was, why insecurity habit, or something more concerning? For Claire's sake, I needed to know more. 2 days later, I was sitting at a corner table at Harrington's Prime with Martin Wells, a fellow food writer who had no idea I was the mysterious AR from the Chronicle. As far as Martin knew, I was just an old friend interested in trying a new restaurant. Never been here before, Martin remarked, looking around the dimly lit interior. Not really on the culinary radar. I could see why. The restaurant occupied a decent corner location, but the interior was showing its age. The carpet was worn in high-traffic areas, the leather booths cracked and patched in places. A far cry from the luxury palace Blake had described. I heard the owner's son is engaged to my daughter, I explained. Thought I should check it out before the wedding. Martin raised his eyebrows. Small world. Well, let's see what they've got. The menu was standard steakhouse fare, nothing innovative or particularly exciting. We ordered a sampling of appetizers and entrees, plus a bottle of wine from their limited selection. The food when it arrived was adequate but uninspired. Certainly not terrible, but nowhere near the 5-star experience Blake had boasted about. So, I asked our server, a young woman named Jessica, "How long have you worked here?" "About 3 years," she replied. "You must have seen some impressive people come through. I heard you host Governor's Tech Executives." Jessica looked confused. We get some financial district regulars. The mayor came once for someone's birthday. It was before my time, though. When the executive chef, he's from New York, right?" She glanced around nervously. "Chef Mike's been here forever. I think he worked at a hotel in Vegas before this." Throughout the meal, I gathered more information. The restaurant seated perhaps 60 people at maximum capacity, employed around 15 staff total, and while it had a loyal local clientele, it was hardly the premier fine dining destination of Northern California. As we finished our meal, I noticed a commotion near the kitchen. A middle-aged man with Blake's same confident posture, but a wearier face, was gesturing emphatically to a younger man, Blake himself. "Your future father-in-law," Martin asked, following my gaze. "And future son-in-law," I confirmed. Their argument, though hushed, was clearly heated. The older man, Wayne Harrington, I presume, jabbed a finger at some papers while Blake shook his head vehemently. They disappeared into what must have been an office at the back. Martin and I settled our bill, which was reasonable for the quality, another contradiction to Blake's claims about premium pricing. As Martin went to retrieve his car, I lingered near the hallway leading to the restrooms, which happened to pass by the office where Blake and his father had gone. "Can't afford that kind of wedding." Wayne's voice carried through the partially open door. "The restaurant is barely breaking even as it is." "It has to be spectacular," Blake insisted. "Claire's father is already judging us. You should see his face looking down on everything." "Then be honest with them about what we can afford." "And look like failures, is that what you want? Your only son looking like a failure to his fiancé's family." "What I don't want is to take out another loan we can't repay. The restaurant needs renovations anyway. We can use the wedding as an excuse to upgrade everything." Blake, listen to me. This place isn't what it used to be. Maybe it's time to be realistic about realistic. Like you watching your dreams die slowly. No thanks. I've got plans to turn this around, and they don't involve admitting defeat to Claire or her judgmental old man. I'd heard enough. I slipped away quietly and exited the restaurant, meeting Martin at the curb. Verdict? He asked as we drove away. Perfectly adequate neighborhood steakhouse, I replied. Nothing special, nothing terrible. Worth a review. I considered this. Maybe. I'll think about it. What I was really thinking about was Blake Sullivan, a man so insecure he would fabricate an entire narrative about his family's modest restaurant. A man who seemed determined to impress at all costs, even if it meant taking out loans they couldn't afford. A man who would be marrying my daughter if I didn't find a way to reveal the truth. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the figure approaching until he rapped sharply on my window. I looked up to see Blake glaring at me, his face flushed with anger. I rolled down the window. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Having dinner," I replied calmly. "You mentioned your family's restaurant." I was curious. "Spying on me, you mean? Following me?" "Not at all. I wanted to see the place where my daughter will be having her wedding reception." Blake's eyes narrowed. "I heard you asking questions, interrogating my staff." "Just making conversation." "Listen to me," he said, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "I know what you're doing, trying to undermine me with Claire. It won't work. I assure you." "No, you listen, old man. Claire and I are getting married. We're building a life that doesn't include your outdated opinions or your sad little house. So do us all a favor and stay out of my business." He straightened, adjusting his tie. "And don't come back to this restaurant. You're not welcome here." Before I could respond, he signaled to a burly man who appeared to be security. "Pete, please escort this gentleman off the property. He's been harassing our staff." "I have not," I began, but the security guard was already opening my car door. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Martin, who had been watching this exchange with astonishment, started the engine. "We're going. We're going." As we pulled away, I watched Blake in the rearview mirror, standing with his arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Friend of yours?" Martin asked dryly. "Future son-in-law," I replied. Emphasis on future. That night, I sat in my study staring at my computer screen. I had a decision to make. As AR, I had the power to write a review of Harrington's Prime that would be read by thousands. I could expose the gap between Blake's grandiose claims and reality. I could potentially damage the restaurant's business, perhaps severely. But that would mean using my professional position for personal revenge, something I had sworn never to do. My reviews had always been honest, fair assessments based on the food and experience alone, never influenced by personal feelings toward the owners. Besides, Wayne Harrington seemed to be a hardworking man, struggling to keep his business afloat. Did he deserve to suffer because his son was a liar? My phone rang. Claire's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to sound normal. "What did you do?" Her voice was tight with anger. "What do you mean? Blake told me you showed up at his family's restaurant today and made a scene, questioned the staff, embarrassed him in front of his father." "Claire, that's not what happened. I simply went to dinner there." Why would you go there without telling us?" "I wanted to see the wedding venue. Is that so strange?" "Blake says you were acting weird, asking suspicious questions." "Dad, why can't you just be happy for me? Why do you have to investigate the man I love, like he's some kind of criminal?" I took a deep breath. "Claire, there are things about Blake that concern me." "Like what?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd discovered without revealing I'd been fact-checking Blake's claims, without sounding like I was indeed investigating him? "I just think you should know more about his family's financial situation before you commit to an expensive wedding there." "Their financial situation? Dad, what are you talking about? Blake's family is very successful." "Are you sure about that? Have you seen the restaurant, talked to his father?" "Of course I've seen it," she snapped. "We've been planning the wedding there for weeks, and Wayne is wonderful. He's completely supportive." This surprised me. "You've been inside Harrington's Prime recently?" "Yes, Dad. Unlike you, I was invited." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Either Claire was lying to protect Blake, or Blake had somehow managed to show her a very different version of the restaurant than what I had seen. Claire, I'm just concerned. No, you're interfering. Blake was right. You're judging him because he's younger, because he has different tastes than you. You've never even given him a chance. That's not true. I invited him into our home and criticized everything about him. Blake says you made him feel unwelcome from the moment he walked in. I was stunned. Had Blake so completely twisted the events of that evening? Claire, please listen. No, Dad, you listen. I love Blake. We're getting married. If you can't support that, if you can't be civil to the man I love, then, her voice broke, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. My daughter, my only child, had just uninvited me from her wedding. For a long time, I stared at the blank screen of my computer. Then slowly, deliberately, I opened a new document and began to type. Harrington's Prime: Big Ambitions, Small Realities. I wrote the most meticulous, factually accurate review I had ever composed. I described the worn carpets, in the mediocre food, the limited wine list, and the outdated decor. But I also acknowledged the reasonable prices, the friendly service, the honest effort behind the operation. It was not a scathing review, but a truthful one, the kind that wouldn't destroy a business, but wouldn't artificially inflate its reputation either. When I finished, I sat back and read it through twice. Then, with a heavy heart but clear conscience, I submitted it to my editor at the Chronicle. The review would run next Sunday, and then I suspected the real drama would begin. I sat before my computer screen, fingers poised over the keyboard, as I carefully reviewed my completed review of Harrington's Prime. The title stared back at me, Grand Ambitions, Modest Realities. It was perhaps the most meticulously fact-checked piece I'd written in years. Every observation about the worn carpet, the mediocre food, the limited wine selection, all documented with photographs stored safely on my phone. The review wasn't cruel, but it was honest. A 3-star assessment that acknowledged the restaurant's reasonable prices and friendly service while noting its considerable shortcomings. My cursor hovered over the submit button. Claire's angry words echoed in my mind. Was I crossing a line, using my professional platform for personal vengeance? No, I decided. This review contained nothing I wouldn't have written had I visited the restaurant under normal circumstances. The fact that the owner's son happened to be my daughter's fiancé didn't change the quality of the food or the accuracy of my observations. I clicked submit. The article would run in Sunday's edition just 3 days from now. My phone rang almost immediately. The caller ID showed Gregory Wallace, my editor at the Chronicle. Anthony, he said without preamble when I answered. Got your Harrington's Prime review. Good piece. Balanced, detailed fare. Thanks, Greg. But I just got off a very interesting call from the owner. Wayne Harrington. Seems he somehow knew the review was coming. I frowned. That's impossible. I only just submitted it. Well, he claims an older gentleman was in the restaurant asking suspicious questions, taking notes. Says his son recognized him as his fiancé's father. That wouldn't be you, would it? My stomach sank. I did visit the restaurant, yes, but no one there knows I'm AR. Apparently, this Harrington fellow thinks you're some kind of corporate spate or competitor. Threatened to sue the paper if we run a hit piece. It's not a hit piece, Greg. It's 3 stars, hardly a takedown. I know that, and you know that. But he's demanding we kill the review entirely. On what grounds? I don't have a conflict of interest. I didn't identify myself as a critic or request special treatment. There was a pause on the line. He didn't mention your connection to his son. No, I replied, puzzled. Just that I was asking questions. Interesting. Greg's voice took on the tone he used when piecing together a story. So the son hasn't told his father about your relationship to the fiancé, or the father isn't mentioning it to me for some reason? I sighed. It's complicated, Greg. Yes, my daughter is engaged to Blake Sullivan, Wayne Harrington's son, but that has nothing to do with my assessment of the restaurant. Except it completely does, Anthony. If we publish this review, it could be perceived as personal. But it's not. Every word is true and fair. I believe you, but perception matters in this business. We can't afford even the appearance of impropriety. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. So you're killing the review? No, Greg said after a long pause. I'm running it. It's good work, and the public deserves to know what they're getting at Harrington's Prime. But Anthony, be prepared for fallout. If this connection becomes public, it could get messy. I understand. After hanging up, I stared at the phone in my hand. Wayne Harrington had called the paper, which meant Blake must have told him about me visiting the restaurant. But Blake apparently hadn't mentioned that I was Claire's father, or Wayne had chosen not to use that information. The question was, why Sunday morning I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. 6 missed calls, 3 from unknown numbers, 2 from Greg and 1 from Martin. A flurry of text message notifications filled my screen. The review had dropped. I opened the Chronicle's website. There it was, my assessment of Harrington's Prime featured prominently in the food and dining section. The comment section was already bustling with activity readers confirming my observations, sharing their own experiences, some defending the restaurant as a neighborhood staple despite its flaws. Greg's text was brief. Wayne Harrington called again, furious, threatened legal action. Legal says we're covered. Hang tight. Martin's message was more colorful. Just connected the dots about why we got thrown out of that restaurant. Your AR, you magnificent bastard. Call me. The unknown numbers had left voicemails, 2 angry messages from Wayne Harrington demanding a retraction and 1 from Blake Sullivan that consisted mainly of profanity and vague threats. I was sipping my morning coffee, contemplating my next move, when a thunderous knocking rattled my front door. Through the beveled glass, I could make out Claire's silhouette. I opened the door to find my daughter standing on the porch, clutching a copy of the Sunday Chronicle. Her face flushed with anger. How could you? She demanded, pushing past me into the house. She slapped the newspaper down on the entryway table, my review of Harrington's Prime clearly visible. You wrote this, your AR. Claire, please calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Blake's family is devastated. The phone at the restaurant has been ringing nonstop with cancellations. Wayne might lose everything because of you. I closed the door and followed her into the living room. The review is fair, Claire. 3 stars out of 5. Hardly a demolition. It's your timing, right before our wedding, and all those comments about worn carpet and outdated decor. You know they can't afford renovations right now. I didn't know that until I visited and overheard Blake arguing with his father, I countered, which by the way revealed that Blake has been lying to you about their financial situation. Claire paced the room, running her hands through her hair in a gesture so like her mother it made my heart ache. Blake explained all that. Yes, the restaurant is going through a rough patch. That's why he's been working so hard to turn things around. He was embarrassed, so he exaggerated some details. It's not a crime to want to impress your fiancé's father. Exaggerated, Claire. He fabricated an entire fictional version of that restaurant. He claimed they own the building when they're actually on a lease. He invented a non-existent chef from New York. That's not exaggeration. That's pathological lying. You don't understand him at all, she shot back. Blake has been under enormous pressure his whole life. His father expects perfection. The restaurant was supposed to be this incredible legacy, but it's been struggling since the recession. Blake just wants to make his father proud, to live up to the family name. By deceiving you, by planning an extravagant wedding they can't afford. Claire stopped pacing and faced me, her expression suddenly cold. At least Blake's father supports his choices. At least Wayne doesn't sabotage his son's happiness. The words hit like a physical blow. Is that what you think I'm doing? Sabotaging your happiness? What else would you call publishing a critical review of your future in-laws business weeks before the wedding? You didn't even have the decency to warn me. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this. I said, my own anger rising now. You're so blinded by Blake that you can't see what's right in front of you. He's using you, Claire. Using your money, your connections, your trust. My money, I'm a marketing manager, Dad. Blake's family has the money even if they're having temporary difficulties. I shook my head. Have you seen their financial records? Their tax returns. Because I checked the public records, and Harrington's Prime has been operating at a loss for 3 years straight. Claire's eyes widened, then narrowed. You investigated them, dug through their private business. God, Dad, who does that? A concerned father, I insisted. Someone who doesn't want to see his daughter marry a man who begins their relationship with lies. A father who doesn't trust his daughter's judgment, you mean? Claire grabbed her purse from the sofa. I thought I could talk sense into you, make you understand what you've done. But clearly you think you're right and everyone else is wrong. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Blake was right about you all along. You're just a bitter old man who can't stand to see someone else take priority in my life. The door slammed behind her with such force that a framed photo fell from the wall, the glass cracking as it hit the floor. I picked it up, a picture of Claire at her college graduation beaming between me and Elizabeth. Happier times that now felt impossibly distant. My phone buzzed with a new text from Greg Harrington's son on line 2 at the office, demanding to speak with AR Claims Personal Vendetta. Need to talk ASAP. The fallout was just beginning. By Monday morning, my review had become the most commented on article in the Chronicle's food section that month. The comments ranged from supportive, "Finally someone tells the truth about this overpriced steakhouse," to venomous, "AR has always been an elitist snob who doesn't understand family restaurants." What no one in the public sphere knew, thankfully, was the personal connection that had led me to Harrington's Prime in the first place. Greg had managed to keep Blake at bay, maintaining the paper's standard policy of not connecting critics to their real identities. But the pressure was building. I needed to gather more information if I was going to protect Claire from making a terrible mistake. My phone rang, a local number I didn't recognize. "Is this Anthony Reynolds?" The male voice on the other end was hesitant with a slight Spanish accent. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Miguel Ramirez. I used to be sous chef at Harrington's Prime. I saw your review. There are things you should know." I sat up straighter. "What kind of thing? Not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere?" We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in the Mission District, far from Harrington's Prime. Miguel was younger than I expected, early 30s, with tired eyes that spoke of long hours in hot kitchens. "I worked at Harrington's for 4 years, he explained, stirring his coffee nervously. "Left about 6 months ago when things started getting problematic." "Problematic? How?" Miguel glanced around, then leaned forward. "The restaurant was always modest, you know. Good steaks, fair prices, regular customers from the financial district. Nothing fancy but honest food. Wayne is a good man, old school restaurateur, but then Blake started taking a more active role in management. What happened? Cost-cutting at first, switching to cheaper suppliers, reducing portion sizes. Normal stuff in a struggling restaurant. But then," he hesitated. "Go on," I encouraged. "Blake started skimming, taking cash from the register, manipulating the books, using vendor accounts for personal purchases. Wayne either didn't notice or didn't want to notice." I frowned. "That's a serious accusation." Miguel pulled out his phone and showed me photographs, receipts for expensive wine and luxury goods charged to restaurant vendor accounts, screenshots of inventory records with obvious discrepancies. "I documented everything before I left," he said. "Was thinking about showing Wayne, but..." He shrugged. "Blake is his only son, and Wayne's health hasn't been great. Heart problems." "Did Blake ever mistreat the staff?" Miguel's bitter laugh was answer enough. "Especially the older employees. Called them dinosaurs, said they were dragging the place down. 3 longtime servers quit because of him. But the worst was how he treated his own father. Like Wayne was an embarrassment, a failure." As Miguel continued sharing details about Blake's behavior and business practices, a clearer picture emerged, one of a desperate man trying to maintain a facade of success while his family's legacy crumbled around him. "There's one more thing," Miguel said, his voice dropping even lower. "Blake has borrowed money from some dangerous people. I overheard him on the phone once promising repayment after his wedding. Something about his fiancé's family having connections that would save the business." My blood ran cold. "What connections?" "I don't know, but he seemed confident that marrying this woman would solve all his financial problems." After parting ways with Miguel, I sat in my car processing what I'd learned. If Miguel was telling the truth and the evidence suggested he was, then Blake wasn't just a liar. He was potentially a criminal, and he seemed to believe that marrying Claire would somehow provide financial salvation. But how Claire made a good living, but nothing that would save a failing restaurant. And while I had been successful in my career, I was hardly wealthy enough to be a target for financial exploitation. What was Blake's angle? The answer hit me with sudden clarity. The Chronicle, my position there, my connections in the restaurant industry. Blake must have discovered who I really was and calculated that having AR as a father-in-law could be leveraged for favorable reviews, industry introductions, investor connections. But if he knew I was AR, why antagonize me? Why lie about the restaurant unless he hadn't known until recently, until after our disastrous dinner perhaps, which might explain his panicked reaction to seeing me at the restaurant. Not just because I was Claire's father checking his claims, but because he had just discovered I was the city's most influential food critic. I needed to warn Claire. But would she believe me over the man she planned to marry? I had already damaged my credibility with her by writing the review without warning her. I decided to write her a letter, a long, detailed explanation of everything I'd learned, everything I suspected. I poured my heart onto the page, not as a critic or investigator, but as a father who loved his daughter more than anything in the world. I described Miguel's allegations, my concerns about Blake's true intentions, my fear that she was being used for connections or financial gain. When I finished, I read it through twice. The letter was honest, heartfelt, and damning. It would either open Claire's eyes or push her even further away. I sealed it in an envelope but didn't immediately send it. Timing would be crucial. If I moved too soon without incontrovertible evidence, she would dismiss my concerns as more interference. For now, I would gather more information, build a stronger case. The wedding was still weeks away. I had time to uncover the full truth. Days passed without contact from Claire. My review of Harrington's Prime had faded from public attention, replaced by newer culinary controversies. I continued my regular work reviewing other restaurants, attending food events, maintaining the facade of normalcy, while my personal life felt increasingly precarious. Then on a foggy Thursday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find an unexpected visitor, Wayne Harrington himself, looking haggard and uncomfortable on my doorstep. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, extending his hand, "I believe we need to talk." I invited him in, surprised by this development. Wayne declined my offer of a drink, sitting stiffly on my living room sofa, a manila envelope clutched in his weathered hands. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "I know you're AR from the Chronicle, and I know why you wrote that review of my restaurant." "It was an honest assessment," I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. "Maybe so. Your observations were accurate enough. But your motivation," he shook his head. "Blake told me everything. How you disapprove of him, how you're trying to sabotage his relationship with your daughter." "That's not true. I'm trying to protect Claire from a man who has consistently lied to her." Wayne's eyes flashed with momentary anger, then softened into something more complicated, a mixture of resignation and shame. "My son exaggerates, always has. Part of why he went into finance, good at selling things, making them sound better than they are. But he loves your daughter. I believe that much." I leaned forward. "Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, Blake has done more than exaggerate. He's fabricated an entire false narrative about your restaurant, your finances, your family legacy. And according to former employees, he's been misappropriating funds from the business." Wayne flinched but didn't look particularly surprised. "You've been talking to Miguel?" "Yes." "Miguel has his own agenda. Wanted to be head chef, I couldn't promote him." "Are you saying his allegations are false?" Wayne stared at his hands. "Not entirely." He opened the manila envelope and withdrew a stack of papers. "These are bank statements, restaurant accounts. Blake has been creative with the bookkeeping, taking loans I didn't approve, using business credit for personal expenses." I was surprised by this admission. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I'm trying to save my son," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "And my restaurant, and maybe your daughter too." He spread the documents on the coffee table between us. "Blake is in trouble, serious trouble. He owes money to people you don't want to owe money to. He's convinced himself that this wedding, this elaborate, expensive wedding he can't afford, will somehow solve everything, that your connections in the restaurant world will bail him out. So he does know I'm AR." Wayne nodded. "Found out a few weeks ago. Friend in the industry recognized your description, put it together. Blake saw it as an opportunity to exploit my position, to save our family business." Wayne corrected, though, without much conviction. "At least that's how he justifies it to himself. The truth is," he sighed heavily, "the truth is my son has a problem. Gambling debts, bad investments, always chasing the big score instead of doing the daily work." I studied Wayne's face, the deep lines around his eyes, the slump of his shoulders. This was a man carrying a heavy burden, trying to protect a son who was his own worst enemy. I'm not here to ask you to retract your review, Wayne continued. It was fair enough. We've got problems at the restaurant, problems I've been ignoring too long. But I am asking you to help me stop this wedding, for everyone's sake, including Claire's. Why now? Why come to me instead of talking to Blake directly? Wayne rubbed his face tiredly. I've tried, God knows I've tried, but Blake won't listen to me, thinks I'm a failure because the restaurant isn't some five-star palace. And now, he tapped the financial documents. Now he's desperate, planning to use the wedding deposits to pay off some of his debts, convinced Claire's family connections will solve everything else. Claire doesn't have family connections in the restaurant world beyond me, I said, and I certainly can't solve Blake's financial problems. I know that, but Blake has built this fantasy where marrying Claire is his ticket out of trouble. When that fantasy crashes into reality, Wayne shook his head grimly. Have you talked to Claire about this? Tried to. She thinks I'm just having cold feet about the expense. Blake has her completely convinced that the restaurant is just going through temporary difficulties, that everything will be fine after the wedding. I considered Wayne's revelations, matching them against what I already knew from Miguel and my own observations. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. What do you propose we do? I asked finally. The wedding is set for 3 weeks from now, at the restaurant. Wayne handed me an invitation from the envelope. I can get you in, even though Blake has tried to have you removed from the guest list. Between now and then, we gather more evidence of what Blake's really planning. Enough to convince Claire before she makes a terrible mistake. I examined the invitation, elegant cream cardstock, announcing the union of Claire Elizabeth Reynolds and Blake Thomas Sullivan at Harrington's Prime. My daughter's wedding planned without my input at a venue chosen to impress rather than celebrate. I'll need to think about this, I said carefully. Working with you behind Claire's back, it could backfire spectacularly. What's the alternative? Let her marry a man who sees her as a meal ticket, who's already planning to use their wedding funds to pay off loan sharks. Wayne stood gathering the documents back into the envelope. Read through these. Call me when you decide. After Wayne left, I spread the financial documents across my dining table. They told a damning story, one of systematic financial mismanagement, possible fraud, and mounting debts. If these records were accurate, Blake Sullivan was not just a liar, but a man on the brink of financial ruin, desperately seeking salvation through marriage to my daughter. I stayed up late into the night analyzing the papers, making notes, building a case. By morning, I had reached a decision. I would work with Wayne to gather irrefutable evidence of Blake's deceptions. Claire deserved the truth, even if it came from an unlikely alliance between her father and her future father-in-law. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of clandestine meetings with Wayne, carefully documented evidence and growing certainty that Blake Sullivan was not just a con man, but potentially dangerous in his desperation. Wayne provided access to more financial records, recorded conversations with Blake about using wedding funds to temporarily cover other obligations, emails to potential investors, leveraging his upcoming marriage to the daughter of San Francisco's most influential food critic. Throughout this period, Claire remained distant. My attempts to reach out were met with brief, cool responses. According to Wayne, she was completely absorbed in wedding preparations, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her. The day before the wedding, my phone rang with Claire's ringtone, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. Dad, her voice was small, uncertain. Claire, I said, relief washing over me. It's so good to hear from you. Can we talk in person? We arranged to meet at Golden Gate Park on a bench near the Conservatory of Flowers, where we'd often come when she was younger. Claire was already waiting when I arrived, looking beautiful, but tired, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I sat beside her. I've missed you, I replied simply. She nodded, blinking back sudden tears. I've missed you too, even when I was angry. I'm sorry about the review, I said. I should have warned you. No, that's not. She twisted her engagement ring nervously. I've been hearing things about Blake, about the restaurant's finances. My heart raced. What kind of things? One of the wedding vendors called me directly when their deposit check bounced. When I asked Blake about it, he got defensive, said his father must have made a mistake. She looked up at me, uncertainty in her eyes. Then I found receipts for gambling debts in his jacket pocket. Thousands of dollars. Claire, I confronted him. He said it was a one-time thing, stress about the wedding, that he'd never do it again. She wiped away a tear. But then I overheard him on the phone talking about using our honeymoon fund to cover some other debt. When I asked him about it, he exploded. Said I was spying on him, that I didn't trust him. Just like you. I took her hand gently. What do you think is happening? I don't know. Her voice broke. That's why I'm here. You were right about the restaurant not being what Blake claimed. What else were you right about? This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the opening to share everything I'd learned. But looking at my daughter's vulnerable face, I hesitated. If I overwhelmed her with accusations and evidence, now would she shut down completely? Blake is in financial trouble, I said carefully. Serious trouble. Wayne has been gathering documentation. You've been talking to Wayne, she interrupted, surprised. Yes, he came to me concerned about Blake's behavior, about the pressure Blake was putting on himself and the restaurant for this wedding. Claire was silent for a long moment, processing this information. So you and Wayne are, what, working together to stop the wedding? We're trying to make sure you have all the facts before you make such an important decision, I corrected. Wayne cares about you. He doesn't want to see you hurt when Blake's financial house of cards collapses. Which will be when? Soon. Possibly immediately after the wedding, when Blake can no longer maintain the illusion that everything is fine. Claire stared at the engagement ring on her finger. I love him, Dad. Despite everything, I thought I knew him. I know you do, I said gently. And I'm sure in his way, Blake loves you too. But love built on lies isn't sustainable. What should I do? She asked in a small voice that reminded me of her childhood questions, how to handle a bully at school, whether to try out for the soccer team. I took a deep breath. That's something only you can decide. But whatever you choose, I'll support you, even if it means watching you marry Blake tomorrow. You'd come to the wedding, even after everything. Of course, I'm your father. Nothing will ever change that. Claire leaned against my shoulder the way she had countless times growing up. I need to think, to talk to Blake again, give him one more chance to be honest with me. Be careful, I cautioned. Blake is under enormous pressure. Wayne thinks he owes money to some dangerous people. She nodded. I won't confront him directly. Just give him an opening to come clean. We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching families stroll through the park, tourists taking photos of the Victorian glass conservatory gleaming in the afternoon sun. Remember when Mom used to bring us here for picnics? Claire asked suddenly. Every Sunday in summer. I smiled at the memory. She'd pack those elaborate lunches and critique every element as if she were writing a review. Claire finished laughing softly. Too much salt in the potato salad. Perfect acidity in the vinaigrette. She taught me everything I know about food writing, I admitted. Before I met her, I was just a journalist with a decent palate. I wish she was here, Claire said quietly. She'd know what to do. She is here in a way. I squeezed her hand. In both of us. And she'd tell you to trust your instincts. They've always been good. When we parted, Claire hugged me tightly. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we talked. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. I watched her walk away, her slender figure receding into the distance, and felt a mixture of hope and dread. Would she find the strength to confront the truth about Blake? Or would she convince herself that love could overcome his deceptions? The answer would come tomorrow at Harrington's Prime, where either a wedding or a reckoning awaited. The morning of the wedding dawned foggy and cool. Typical San Francisco weather that would burn off by afternoon. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the letter I'd written to Claire tucked into my breast pocket like a talisman. Whatever happened today, I wanted to be prepared. Wayne had called late the previous night. Blake had been agitated, making last-minute changes to the seating arrangements, arguing with vendors about payment terms. Claire had tried to talk to him about their future, their finances, but he'd brushed her off, blaming wedding stress and promising they'd discuss everything during their honeymoon. She's still planning to go through with it, Wayne had said, disappointment heavy in his voice. We don't know that for certain, I'd replied, though, without much conviction. Now, as I knotted my tie and checked my appearance one last time, I steeled myself for what might be the most difficult day of my life since losing Elizabeth. I might have to watch my daughter marry a man I knew would bring her pain, Or I might witness the collapse of her dreams in real time, her heart breaking, as Blake's web of lies finally unraveled. Either way, I would be there for her. That was the only certainty I clung to as I headed downtown toward Harrington's Prime and whatever awaited me there. Harrington's Prime had been transformed for the wedding, though the effort felt like putting expensive makeup on tired skin. White silk draperies softened the worn edges I'd noted during my previous visit, while strategic lighting created warm pools that disguised water stains and carpet wear. Fresh flower arrangements perfumed the air, masking the lingering kitchen odors that had been so noticeable during my review visit. Wedding magic hiding reality beneath beautiful surfaces. How perfectly appropriate. I arrived during the cocktail hour, scanning the room for familiar faces. Guests mingled in small clusters, champagne glasses, catching light from the crystal fixtures. The staff moved with unusual precision, clearly under strict orders to perform flawlessly for this special occasion. "Dad?" Claire's voice cut through the reception chatter like salvation. She appeared at my side in her wedding gown, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. Beautiful beyond description, radiant with a complicated happiness that made my chest tighten with protective love. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered, embracing me tightly. "I was hoping, after everything." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," I replied, meaning every word. "You look absolutely stunning." Relief flooded her features. "I've missed you so much. This whole month felt wrong without you here." Around us, I noticed several restaurant employees stealing glances in our direction. Word was spreading quickly through the state the man from that night was back, the one who'd caused such a scene with the boss. Nervous energy rippled through their ranks like stones dropped in still water. "How are you feeling?" I asked quietly, searching her face for signs of doubt or certainty. "Overwhelmed," she admitted. "Everything's happening so fast." "Claire, did you talk to Blake about what we discussed yesterday?" She nodded, a shadow crossing her expression. "He insisted it was all temporary financial stress. Said the restaurant is about to turn a corner with some new investors. That after the honeymoon, everything will be different." She hesitated. "He seems sincere, Dad." Before I could respond, her attention was caught by a bridesmaid waving urgently from across the room. "I need to go. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. We'll talk more at the reception, okay?" She squeezed my hand and hurried away, leaving me with a distinct impression that she was still wrestling with doubts but pushing forward nonetheless. Across the room near the bar where wedding toasts would soon be offered, I spotted Blake deep in conversation with Wayne. They were discussing something intently, occasionally gesturing toward different areas of the restaurant. Wayne looked exhausted, the strain of recent weeks visible in the slump of his shoulders. Blake, by contrast, was animated, almost manic, his usual polish unable to conceal an underlying tension. "Oh no, that old man showed up again." Blake's voice carried further than he'd intended, reaching several nearby guests who turned with curious expressions. His father followed his gaze, landing directly on me with sharp calculation. "Is that really him?" Wayne's response held notes I couldn't immediately interpret. Recognition, perhaps, or concern that went deeper than simple wedding guest management. The conversation between father and son continued in lowered tones, but their body language spoke volumes. Wayne's questions, Blake's defensive responses, the way both men kept glancing in my direction with growing unease. Whatever was being discussed, it had them both agitated. I maintained my position near the entrance, playing the devoted father role, while observing everything with professional detachment. Staff members whispered among themselves, some pointing discreetly in my direction. Guests began to notice the undercurrent of tension, conversations growing quieter, as people sensed drama brewing beneath the wedding's polished surface. Wayne straightened his tie and began walking purposefully in my direction, his expression carefully neutral, but eyes sharp with assessment. Behind him, Blake watched with visible anxiety, clearly dreading whatever conversation was about to unfold. "Good afternoon." Wayne extended his hand with practiced hospitality, but I caught the careful way he studied my face. "I see you received the invitation after all." "Claire made sure of it," I replied, accepting his handshake with firm confidence. "Blake is concerned about your presence," Wayne said quietly. "He fears disruption." "I'm here for my daughter, nothing more." Wayne nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "Just as we discussed, wait for the right moment." He glanced over his shoulder to where Blake now stood with a cluster of groomsmen still watching us. "He's on edge. Last night, I found him in the office shredding financial documents. When I questioned him, he claimed it was routine cleanup. And the evidence we compiled? Safe, but Blake suspects something. He's been asking strange questions about our conversations about whether I've spoken to you or Claire about the restaurant's finances. A chime sounded signaling guests to move to the ceremony space. The restaurant's main dining room transformed with more draperies and flowers into a makeshift chapel. I should take my position, Wayne said. The father of the groom has responsibilities. And the father of the bride has his, I replied meaningfully. Wayne gave a slight nod before walking away, leaving me to find my seat among the gathering guests. I noticed Miguel, the former sous chef, slipping in through a side entrance, dressed in waiter's attire. Our eyes met briefly. He had followed through on our contingency plan to have someone inside the kitchen just in case. The ceremony space filled quickly with well-dressed guests, an eclectic mix of Claire's friends from college and work-distant relatives and what appeared to be business associates of the Harrington family, rather than personal friends. The divide was noticeable warmth and genuine affection on Claire's side, professional networking, and obligation on Blake's. I took my seat in the front row, the traditional place for the father of the bride, despite my strained relationship with the groom. The string quartet began playing and the processional commenced with bridesmaids and groomsmen walking the short aisle. Wayne entered with Blake's mother, a thin woman I hadn't met before. Her expression, a practiced society smile that revealed nothing. Then Blake appeared standing at the altar with the officiator, his custom tuxedo impeccable, his smile confident, but eyes constantly scanning the room as if assessing exits and threats. When his gaze landed on me, a flicker of hostility crossed his features before he recovered his composure. The music changed to the traditional bridal march. Everyone stood turning toward the entrance where Claire would appear. My heart swelled with pride and concern in equal measure as she stepped into view, radiant in her wedding dress, a delicate veil partially obscuring her face. She walked alone. She had insisted on this modern touch rather than being given away like property, a feminist stance I had always supported. As she passed my seat, our eyes met. The smile she gave me was genuine, but tinged with something I couldn't quite identify, resolution perhaps, or resignation. She took her place beside Blake, who took her hands with possessive confidence, his smile for the audience rather than his bride. The ceremony proceeded with the standard rituals, welcome readings, vows. I found myself holding my breath during the officiator's traditional question, if anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The momentary silence hung heavy with possibility. My hand twitched toward the evidence in my pocket, financial records, loan documents, proof of Blake's deceptions. But I remained still. This wasn't the moment. Claire needed to make this decision herself, not have it forced upon her by a dramatic interruption. No objections were raised. The ceremony continued. Do you, Claire Elizabeth Reynolds, take Blake Thomas Sullivan to be your lawfully wedded husband? I watched my daughter's face carefully as the question was posed. A slight hesitation, almost imperceptible, before she answered. I... She paused, her eyes meeting Blake's, then darting briefly to mine. Blake's smile faltered. A murmur rippled through the gathered guests. Claire took a deep breath. Before I answer, I need to ask Blake something important. The officiator blinked in surprise. This was definitely not in the script. Claire, Blake whispered urgently, what are you doing? She turned to face him fully, her voice clear and steady despite the unorthodox moment. Blake, last night I found something in your office. Loan documents from people with very unusual lending terms. Blake's face drained of color. This isn't the time. I also found correspondence about using our wedding gifts and honeymoon fund to pay these people back, and emails to potential investors where you describe me as your connection to AR San Francisco's premier food critic. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes were now bright with unshed tears. I need to know right now in front of everyone we love, is this marriage about us or is it about money? A collective gasp swept through the gathering. Wayne closed his eyes briefly, a mixture of pain and vindication crossing his features. Claire, baby, you're stressed. Wedding jitters. Blake tried to take her hands, but she pulled away slightly. We can discuss this privately. No, no more privacy, no more secrets. Claire's voice strengthened. I deserve the truth, Blake. Right here, right now. The desperation in Blake's eyes was painful to witness. A man watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. He glanced wildly around the room at the shocked faces of the guests, at his father's resigned expression, at my carefully neutral observation. This is ridiculous, he finally sputtered. Your father put you up to this, didn't he? He's been trying to sabotage us from the beginning. Answer my question, Blake. His composure cracked entirely. What do you want me to say? That the restaurant is failing? That my father's life's work is circling the drain while he refuses to modernize? That I've been killing myself trying to save it? Claire remained steady. I want you to tell me the truth about us, about why you proposed to me. Was it because you love me or because of who my father is? I didn't even know who your father was when we started dating, Blake protested, his voice rising. How was I supposed to know that Anthony Reynolds, the boring old man who writes community pieces for the Chronicle, was actually AR, the city's most influential food critic? Another wave of murmurs swept the room. Many guests were only now realizing the connection. But when you found out, Claire pressed. Blake's silence was damning. When did you find out? She asked quietly. He swallowed hard. 2 months ago, a friend in the industry showed me an old photograph from some awards dinner. Recognized your father. Well, before or after you proposed? Blake's eyes dropped. After. Claire nodded slowly as if confirming something she had already suspected. And suddenly you were very excited about having the wedding at your father's restaurant, about introducing me to all your father's investors, about our future in the restaurant business together. Is that so wrong? Blake demanded, desperation making him reckless. Using every advantage we have, your father could have helped us, helped my family, but instead he wrote that hit piece review. He tried to destroy us. 3 stars out of 5 is hardly a hit piece. I couldn't help commenting from my seat. Blake whirled on me, fury replacing his usual calculated charm. This is all because of you. You couldn't stand that your daughter found someone successful, someone with vision. You had to tear me down, make me look like a failure. You managed that quite effectively on your own, Wayne said quietly, stepping forward. Blake, enough. It's over. Over. Blake laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Nothing's over. Claire and I are getting married. Her father will retract his review. We'll get the investment we need. Everything will proceed as planned. Claire shook her head sadly. No, Blake, it won't. She gently removed her engagement ring and held it out to him. I can't marry someone who sees me as a business opportunity. Blake stared at the ring in her outstretched palm, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and despair. You'll regret this, he hissed. All of you. His gaze swept from Claire to me, to his father, encompassing everyone in his fury. I was the only one with vision, the only one who could have saved that pathetic restaurant. Now you can all watch it sink together. He stormed down the aisle, shoving past startled guests, his groomsmen exchanging uncertain glances before awkwardly following him out. The room erupted into chaotic conversation. The officiator looked completely bewildered. Claire stood alone at the altar, still holding the rejected engagement ring, her expression a complex mixture of grief and relief. I made my way to her side, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. Are you okay? She leaned against me. I think so, or I will be. She looked up with tear-filled eyes. I knew last night when I found those documents. I just needed to hear him say it. You were very brave, I told her. I learned from the best, she replied, squeezing my hand. A critic who never compromises on the truth even when it's difficult. Wayne approached us hesitantly. Claire, I'm so sorry for everything Blake put you through, for not seeing it sooner. Claire surprised us both by embracing him. It's not your fault, Wayne. Blake made his own choices. A commotion from the back of the room drew our attention. Miguel was hurrying toward us, still in his borrowed waiter's uniform. Mr. Harrington, he said urgently, Blake is in the office. He's destroying documents, emptying the safe. The kitchen staff tried to stop him, but he's threatening anyone who gets close. Wayne's face darkened. "Excuse me," he said, hurrying toward the back of the restaurant. I turned to Claire. "We should make an announcement to the guests. They deserve some explanation." She nodded, then addressed the confused gathering with remarkable poise. "I want to thank everyone for coming today. As you've witnessed, the wedding will not be proceeding as planned. Blake and I," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we discovered we want different things from life. I apologize for the disruption and appreciate your understanding during this difficult time." Professional to the end, I thought proudly. She handled the uncomfortable situation with grace that belied her years. As the guests began to disperse, many coming forward to offer Claire words of support or awkward condolences, I noticed a thin man in an expensive suit speaking urgently with one of Blake's groomsmen near the bar. Something about his demeanor, the cold calculation in his eyes, the way others gave him a wide berth, raised my journalistic instincts. "Who's that?" I asked Miguel, who was here to direct the catering staff on what to do with the elaborate wedding feast. Miguel glanced over and paled slightly. "Victor Mendez. He's not someone you want to owe money to. Blake borrowed heavily from him to cover the wedding expenses. Should we be concerned? Let's just say it's good that Blake is still in the building. Mendez doesn't like to be kept waiting for his money." A crash from the direction of the office interrupted our conversation. Wayne's voice, raised in anger, carried through the now quiet restaurant. Claire and I exchanged glances before heading toward the sound, Miguel trailing behind us. We found Wayne and Blake in the small office behind the kitchen, surrounded by scattered papers and open drawers. The office safe stood open and empty. "Where is it?" Wayne demanded. "The operating cash, the wedding deposits, all of it." Blake stood defiant, a briefcase clutched in his hand. "Paying my debts, unless you want worse trouble than a failed restaurant." He spotted us in the doorway, and his expression hardened. "Come to gloat, the perfect critic and his perfect daughter, destroying everything I've built." "You did that yourself," Claire said quietly, "with every lie, every manipulation." "You have no idea what it takes to succeed in this business," Blake spat. "While you were building your cute little marketing career, I was trying to save a family legacy. By stealing from it." Wayne gestured to the empty safe. "That money was meant to pay our staff, our vendors, people who depend on us for their livelihoods. People who will be looking for new jobs anyway when this place inevitably closes," Blake retorted. "I'm just being practical." A shadow fell across the doorway. Victor Mendez stood there, flanked by two broad-shouldered men whose bulging suit jackets suggested concealed weapons. "Blake," Mendez said softly, his voice carrying more menace than a shout. "I believe we had an appointment." Blake's arrogance evaporated instantly. "Victor, yes, of course. I was just on my way to see you. With my money, I hope." "Absolutely." Blake clutched the briefcase tighter. "Everything's here as promised." Mendez's cold gaze swept over the rest of us. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Wayne interjected, stepping forward. "Whatever arrangement you had with my son, it didn't involve stealing from the restaurant's accounts. That money belongs to our business and our employees." Mendez raised an eyebrow. "Your son borrowed quite substantially from me, Mr. Harrington, with certain assurances about repayment after this wedding." His gaze shifted to Claire. "I understand congratulations are no longer in order." Blake looked panicked now, caught between his father's anger and his creditor's expectation. "Victor, I can explain everything. If we could just step outside." "The police are on their way," Miguel announced from behind us, holding up his phone. "Anonymous tip about embezzlement and theft." Blake's face contorted with rage. "You called the cops after everything I've done for this place." "Done to this place," Wayne corrected grimly. "And yes, I authorized Miguel to call if you attempted to leave with that money." Mendez's expression remained impassive, but his eyes had grown considerably colder. "Police involvement complicates matters, Blake." "It doesn't have to," Blake said desperately. "We can still resolve this. The wedding's off, but there are other opportunities. Claire's father is AR from the Chronicle. He can help promote any restaurant investments." "Right." He looked at me pleadingly. "I review restaurants honestly, regardless of who owns them," I replied evenly. Blake's desperate gaze turned to Claire. "Tell them, Claire. Tell them you'll still help. Your marketing expertise, your father's influence. We had plans." "Your plans," Claire corrected quietly. Never mine. The sound of sirens grew steadily louder outside. Mendez stepped back from the doorway, his face a careful mask. I'll be in touch, Blake, soon. The implied threat hung in the air as he and his associates melted away toward the restaurant's side exit. Blake's composure crumbled entirely. You've ruined everything, he whispered, looking from Wayne to Claire to me. All of you. Two police officers appeared in the doorway. We received a call about a theft in progress. Wayne stepped forward. My son has taken money from the restaurant, safe approximately $30,000 in cash, including customer deposits and operating funds. I'd like to file charges. Blake's face went slack with shock. Dad, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Wayne replied, the weight of painful decision evident in his voice. It's time you faced consequences, Blake. Real ones. As the officers began reading Blake his rights, the reality of the situation seemed to finally penetrate his defenses. His carefully constructed world of deception and manipulation had collapsed entirely. His gaze found Claire one last time, not angry now, but bewildered, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how his plans had gone so terribly wrong. Claire turned away, unable to watch as Blake was escorted from the building. I put my arm around her shoulders, offering what comfort I could. I'm so sorry it ended this way, I said softly. I'm not, she replied, surprising me. Better now than years from now, with shared accounts and children and even more complex deceptions. She looked up at me with red-rimmed but clear eyes. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't, or wouldn't. Wayne approached us looking exhausted but somehow lighter. Claire, I don't know what to say. My son, he shook his head. There are no adequate apologies. None needed, she assured him. You tried to warn me, both of you did. I just wasn't ready to hear it until I found the evidence myself. Wayne nodded gratefully, then gestured to the abandoned wedding setup still visible through the office doorway. What a waste. All this food, the decorations. Claire considered this for a moment, then straightened with sudden resolve. No, not a waste. She turned to Miguel, who stood nearby. The guests have mostly left, but the food is all prepared, right? Yes, Miguel confirmed. Everything's ready. The kitchen staff is just waiting for instructions. Then let's not let it go to waste. She turned to Wayne. What if we open the restaurant today? Serve a special menu to whoever wants to come, no charge. Like a community appreciation day. Wayne blinked in surprise. After everything that's happened, you still want to help? Not for Blake's sake, Claire clarified. For yours. For the staff who worked so hard today. For all the honest people who got caught in Blake's scheme. I watched my daughter with swelling pride. Even in her personal crisis, her instinct was to find the positive, to create something worthwhile from the ruins of her wedding day. A lovely idea. Yay, I agreed. I could make some calls, spread the word about a special one-day event at Harrington's Prime. Wayne looked between us with growing wonder. You would do that even after I let Blake deceive you for so long. You tried to make it right, Claire said simply. That's what matters. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Calls were made, social media posts crafted, and word spread quickly about the impromptu open house at Harrington's Prime. Claire changed from her wedding dress into more casual attire, her bridesmaid helping her pack away the gown with tender care. Curious diners began arriving, drawn by the unusual story and the promise of free food from a restaurant recently reviewed by the mysterious AR. The staff relieved that they would still be paid thanks to Wayne pressing charges and recovering most of the stolen money, threw themselves into their work with renewed enthusiasm. I found myself at the bar watching Claire move through the gathering crowd with remarkable poise, explaining the unusual circumstances with graceful humor that put everyone at ease. She had transformed what should have been a devastating personal humiliation into a community celebration. Your daughter is extraordinary, Wayne said, joining me with 2 glasses of the restaurant's best scotch. I've never seen anyone handle such a situation with more grace. She takes after her mother, I replied, accepting the drink. Blake could have learned so much from her, Wayne mused sadly, if he'd been interested in genuine partnership rather than what he could gain. He sighed deeply. I failed him as a father, gave him too much, expected too little. You tried to stop him when it mattered most, I pointed out. That counts for something. Wayne nodded thoughtfully, then raised his glass. To unexpected alliances. And to truth, I added, however uncomfortable. We drank in companionable silence, watching as the restaurant filled with people, laughter, gradually replacing the earlier tension. Miguel emerged from the kitchen now wearing a proper chef's jacket, carrying a tray of beautifully presented appetizers. "He's good," I observed. "Better than good." "He is," Wayne agreed. "Blake always resisted promoting him, said he wasn't prestigious enough. Prestige is overrated. Talent and integrity matter more." Wayne studied me thoughtfully. "Would you consider—" "No, never mind. Too soon." "Consider what?" "Writing another review after we make some changes. Miguel as head chef, some renovations using the insurance money from that water damage claim we never filed." Wayne's eyes held a spark of renewed purpose. "No special treatment, just an honest assessment of what we could become without Blake's interference." "I'd be happy to," I replied, "in a few months once you've had time to implement your changes." Claire joined us, color high in her cheeks. "This is amazing. People keep arriving. The dining room is almost full." "Thanks to you, Wayne said warmly. "And to you," she countered, "for having the courage to hold Blake accountable, even though it must have been incredibly painful." Wayne nodded, emotion making speech difficult. After a moment, he excused himself to check on the kitchen, leaving Claire and me alone. "How are you really doing?" I asked once he was out of earshot. "Processing," she admitted. "It's strange. I feel like I should be devastated, but mostly I just feel relieved." She gazed around the restaurant thoughtfully. "I think part of me knew something was wrong for a long time. I just didn't want to see it." "Love can be blind," I offered, "or at least nearsighted." That drew a small laugh from her. "Very diplomatic, Dad." Her expression grew more serious. "Thank you for not saying 'I told you so,' for being here even when I pushed you away." "Always," I promised. "That's the deal with parenthood. You never stop caring, never stop wanting the best, even when they're adults making their own choices. Even bad ones. Especially bad ones. That's when you need support most." I hesitated, then added, "Your mother would have been so proud of how you handled today." Claire's eyes misted briefly. I thought about her a lot last night, wondering what advice she would have given me. She smiled softly. "I think she would have told me to trust my instincts." "She absolutely would have. She always said you had the best sit detector she'd ever seen." "It malfunctioned pretty spectacularly with Blake," Claire pointed out ruefully. "Even the best equipment needs recalibration sometimes." 3 months later, I sat at my desk reviewing the final draft of my new article, Harrington's Prime, A Renaissance in Progress. Wayne had made good on his promises. Miguel was now head chef. The interior had been tastefully updated, and the menu reflected an honest approach to quality steakhouse fare at reasonable prices. No pretensions, no exaggerated claims, just good food prepared with integrity. The restaurant would never be the five-star fantasy that Blake had fabricated, but it had found something more valuable: authentic identity and renewed purpose. My review acknowledged the transformation while maintaining journalistic objectivity. 4 stars with potential for more as they continued to refine their approach. My phone chimed with a message from Claire. "Dinner tonight, I have news." We met at my house where I prepared her childhood favorite roast chicken with lemon and herbs, a recipe Elizabeth had perfected years ago. Claire arrived bearing a bottle of wine and a brightness in her expression I hadn't seen in months. "I got the promotion," she announced as she hung up her coat. "Senior Marketing Director, I start next month." "Congratulations, I knew you would get it." I embraced her warmly. "Tell me everything." Over dinner, she shared her excitement about the new role, the team she'd be leading, the challenges ahead. The shadow of Blake and the wedding that wasn't had receded, replaced by renewed focus on her own goals and aspirations. "I've been thinking," she said as we finished the meal, "about what happened with Blake, about how easily I believed what I wanted to believe." "That's human nature," I offered. "We all do it." "Maybe, but I've realized something important. In my work, I'm incredibly analytical. I question data, verify claims, test assumptions. But in my personal life," she shook her head ruefully, "I suspended all critical thinking because I wanted the fairy tale." "Don't be too hard on yourself. Relationships aren't marketing campaigns." "No, but they should still be based on truth." She smiled thoughtfully. "You know what I admire most about your work as a critic? Your honesty, even when it's difficult, even when people might not like what you have to say." "Honesty without cruelty," I clarified. "That's always been my goal, to be truthful but fair." I'm trying to apply that principle more broadly now, Claire said. In my relationships, my career choices, everything. As I cleared the plates, she pulled an envelope from her purse. By the way, Wayne asked me to give you this. Inside was a handwritten note thanking me for the fair review, along with a photograph of the restaurant's newly renovated interior. The staff gathered proudly in front. Wayne and Miguel stood in the center, both looking energized and optimistic. He's invited us to the official reopening next week, Claire said. I told him we'd be there. Absolutely, I agreed. Have you heard anything about Blake? Her expression sobered. Wayne mentioned he took a plea deal on the embezzlement charges, probation restitution payments. He's moved to Chicago working for some financial services firm. She paused. Wayne still sends him money sometimes. He can't quite let go even after everything. That's parenthood too, I said softly. The love doesn't stop even when it's complicated by disappointment. Claire helped me with the dishes, our comfortable routine feeling like a return to normalcy after months of tension. As we finished, she asked suddenly, do you think I'll ever trust my judgment? In relationships, I mean. Without question, I replied confidently. But maybe with a healthier dose of skepticism next time. Trust but verify, a good principle for critics and for life in general. Trust but verify, she repeated, nodding. I like that. Later that evening, as Claire was preparing to leave, she paused in the hallway looking at the family photos that lined the walls. We should take a new picture, she suggested. Something to mark this new chapter. I'd like that very much. She hugged me tightly before leaving. Love you, Dad. Thanks for being my North Star when I was lost. Always, I promised again, watching as she walked to her car with confident steps moving forward into a future unburdened by deception. The following week, Claire and I attended the grand reopening of Harrington's Prime. The transformation was remarkable, not into the fictional, five-star establishment of Blake's imagination, but into something authentic and welcoming. Wayne greeted us warmly, pride evident in his eyes as he showed us the changes. Miguel's menu was a perfect balance of classic steakhouse fare and creative new offerings. The wine list, while not extensive, was thoughtfully curated. Most importantly, the staff operated with a new energy freed from Blake's oppressive management and false pretenses. As we enjoyed our meal, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. What had begun as a simple dinner to meet my daughter's boyfriend had evolved into a complex story of deception, discovery, and ultimately redemption. Not unlike evaluating a restaurant, I realized looking beneath the surface presentation to find the truth of what was being offered. Penny for your thoughts, Claire said, noticing my contemplative expression. Just thinking about how we evaluate things, restaurants, people, relationships, the importance of looking past the surface. Like a good critic, she smiled. Exactly like that, I agreed. The presentation matters, but ultimately, it's the substance that counts. Wayne stopped by our table with 2 glasses of champagne. A toast, he proposed, to new beginnings, and to honesty, however difficult it might be. We raised our glasses in agreement. The bitter appetizer of Blake's deception and the expensive main course of painful truth had finally led us here to a dessert of sorts, sweet with authenticity and the promise of better things ahead. Sometimes I reflected the most satisfying endings don't come from avoiding difficult truths, but from embracing them fully. In restaurants, in relationships, in life, the finest experiences are those built on honesty, integrity, and genuine connection. A lesson worth the price of admission, however steep it might have been. The grand reopening of Harrington's Prime was indeed a success, but the journey toward rebuilding had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, Wayne invited me to consult informally on several aspects of the restaurant's operation. Though I maintained professional boundaries regarding my role as a critic, I was happy to share general industry insights I'd gained over decades of dining experiences. The key, I explained to Wayne one afternoon as we sat in his newly renovated office, is consistency, not just in food quality, but in identity. Know who you are and don't try to be something else. That was Blake's mistake, Wayne mused, examining the new menu Miguel had developed. Always wanting to be the most exclusive, the most expensive, the most impressive. Never satisfied with honest quality. Exactly. The restaurants I've seen thrive over decades aren't necessarily the trendiest or the most expensive. They're the ones that understand their purpose and execute it consistently with integrity. Wayne nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about what you said regarding wine service, having fewer selections but training the staff to know them thoroughly. Better to have 30 wines they can discuss intelligently than 300 they know nothing about. I agreed. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Miguel entered his chef's jacket crisp and professional, a far cry from the nervous former employee I'd met months ago. The new supplier delivered the beef samples, he announced. I'd appreciate your opinions, both of you. We followed him to the kitchen, where 3 different cuts of steak awaited our evaluation. The quality was evident, immediately properly aged, well-marbled, sourced from sustainable ranches. The price point is higher, Miguel acknowledged, but still within our target range. And the quality difference is significant. Wayne examined the meat carefully. What do you think, Anthony, worth the investment? I appreciated that he valued my opinion while recognizing I couldn't give official endorsements. Speaking purely as someone who appreciates good steak, I'd say the difference is noticeable. The marbling on this ribeye alone tells the story. Miguel nodded in agreement. My thought exactly. We're not trying to be the cheapest steakhouse in town, just honest about what we offer and fair about what we charge for it. This philosophy, honesty, and fairness had become the guiding principle of Harrington's Prime's renaissance. Wayne had embraced transparency with his staff, sharing financial information that Blake had previously kept hidden, involving them in decisions, and most importantly, acknowledging past mistakes while focusing on future improvements. The transformation extended beyond food and decor to the very culture of the establishment. Staff members who had once worked in fear of Blake's unpredictable temper now contributed ideas freely. Longtime employees who had nearly quit returned, bringing valuable institutional knowledge and customer relationships with them. We've started a weekly staff meal, Wayne told me as we sampled the steaks Miguel had prepared. Everyone sits down together before service on Mondays, kitchen staff. Servers hosts everyone. We share food talk about the week ahead, dress any concerns. It's been remarkable for morale. Building community, I observed. That matters as much as the food sometimes. Claire suggested it actually, Wayne admitted with a smile. She's been full of ideas. Said something about internal marketing being as important as external. My daughter had indeed maintained a connection with Harrington's Prime, offering occasional marketing advice as the restaurant reestablished itself. It was her way of making peace with what had happened, I suspected, taking the painful experience and transforming it into something constructive. After our tasting, Wayne walked me to my car. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said, his expression turning serious. It's about Blake. I tensed slightly. Though we developed a friendship, Blake remained a sensitive subject between us. What about him? He's completed the financial restitution payments. Ahead of schedule, actually. Wayne looked troubled. He's asked to visit, says he wants to apologize in person. To you. To all of us. You, Claire, me, the staff he mistreated. Wayne ran a hand through his graying hair. I don't know if it's genuine contrition or another manipulation. I thought you might have insight. I considered this carefully. Have you discussed it with Claire? Not yet. Wanted your opinion first. Blake hurt her deeply, I said after a moment. Not just with the broken engagement, but with the realization that their entire relationship might have been calculated. That's not something easily forgiven. Wayne nodded solemnly. I understand that. As his father, I want to believe he's capable of genuine remorse, of learning from his mistakes. But I'm not blind to who he is anymore. I think Claire should make her own decision about whether to see him, I advised. As should you. As for me, I paused, reflecting. I'm open to hearing what he has to say, but with appropriate skepticism. Fair enough, Wayne agreed. I'll talk to Claire, see what she thinks. That evening, I received a call from my daughter. Dad, Wayne mentioned Blake wants to meet with us. Her voice was steady, but I could detect the undercurrent of tension. What do you think? I think it's entirely your decision whether you want to see him, I replied. No one would blame you if you declined. Part of me wants to, she admitted, to understand what was real and what wasn't, but another part thinks it's just reopening a wound that's finally starting to heal. Both perspectives are valid. What would you do? She asked softly. I considered the question carefully. I'd probably hear him out, but in a public setting with clear boundaries. Not because I expect meaningful closure, but because I'd wonder otherwise. That's what I'm thinking too, she sighed. Limited engagement, neutral location, no expectations. Whatever you decide, I support you completely. And if you want me there, I'm there. I do, she said firmly. I definitely do. 2 days later, we gathered at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Union Square, far from both my home and Harrington's Prime. Claire and I arrived early, selecting a table with good visibility and a clear path to the exit. Wayne joined us moments later, his expression a mixture of parental hope and weary caution. Blake arrived precisely on time, dressed in a conservative suit that seemed designed to convey seriousness and reliability. Gone were the flashy accessories and overly polished appearance. He approached our table with visible hesitation, his confident stride replaced by the careful movements of someone entering uncertain territory. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, remaining standing, until Wayne gestured to the empty chair. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Blake cleared his throat. "I know words are inadequate," he began, "especially coming from me. But I wanted to say in person how deeply sorry I am for my behavior, my deceptions, and the hurt I caused all of you." Claire remained perfectly still, her expression composed but eyes alert, studying Blake with the careful assessment of someone who had learned an expensive lesson about trust. "Chicago has been clarifying," Blake continued when no one responded. "Working for someone else, starting at the bottom, no family connections to leverage. It's been humbling. Necessary." "Why are you here, Blake?" Claire asked directly, her voice calm but firm. "What do you want from this meeting?" He met her gaze squarely for the first time. "Not reconciliation. I know that's impossible. Not forgiveness, which I haven't earned." He took a deep breath. "Just a chance to acknowledge directly how wrong I was and to thank you in a way." "Thank us," Wayne echoed, surprised. "For stopping me before I caused even more damage," Blake explained. "For holding me accountable. I was spiraling, making increasingly desperate decisions, lying so much I was starting to believe my own fabrications." He turned to me. "Your review wasn't a hit piece, it was accurate. The restaurant deserved better than what I was doing to it." I studied him carefully, looking for signs of the old Blake, the calculating charm, the practiced sincerity. What I saw instead was something I hadn't expected: genuine discomfort, the awkwardness of someone forcing themselves to face consequences rather than avoid them. "The therapist I've been seeing calls it pathological self-aggrandizement," Blake continued, "a pattern of exaggeration and deception driven by deep insecurity. Not an excuse, just an explanation. I'm trying to understand myself." Claire's posture softened slightly, though her guard remained up. "I'm glad you're getting help, Blake." "Too late for us," he acknowledged, "but hopefully not too late for me to build an honest life eventually." He glanced at Wayne. "Or to have some kind of relationship with my father again someday." Wayne's eyes glistened with unshed tears, the complex love of a parent for a troubled child evident in his expression. "One day at a time, son." Blake nodded, then turned back to Claire. "I know you have every reason to doubt my sincerity, but for whatever it's worth, not everything was a lie. I did care for you in my own damaged way." "I believe you think that's true," Claire replied carefully, "but I'm not sure you knew how to care for someone without calculating what they could do for you. That's not love, Blake. That's transaction." He flinched but nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm learning the difference now." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. "This isn't a grand gesture or an attempt to buy forgiveness. It's practical restitution." He slid the envelope across the table to Claire. She opened it cautiously to reveal a cashier's check for a significant amount. "Your half of the deposits that were lost," Blake explained. "Wedding venue, honeymoon reservations, everything that couldn't be refunded. I've been saving from every paycheck." Claire stared at the check for a long moment, then looked up with a complicated expression. "Thank you for this. It's unexpected." "It's the bare minimum," Blake corrected. "Just the beginning of making amends." The conversation continued for another hour. Careful, measured exchanges that navigated the complex terrain between accountability and possibility. Blake made no grand promises, asked for no immediate redemption. Instead, he simply acknowledged the reality of what had happened and his responsibility for it. When he finally rose to leave, he extended his hand to each of us in turn. Wayne clasped it firmly, father and son communicating volumes in that simple contact. I shook it briefly, acknowledging the gesture without fully embracing it. Claire hesitated longest before accepting the handshake, her expression contemplative. "Goodbye, Blake," she said simply. "Goodbye, Claire. Be well." He nodded to Wayne and me, then walked away shoulders straight, but without the artificial confidence that had once defined him. We sat in silence for several minutes after his departure, processing the unexpected encounter. "What do you think?" Wayne finally asked. "Was it genuine?" "Parts of it," Claire replied thoughtfully. "The therapy, the struggle in Chicago, the restitution check, those felt real. He's always been a good performer," I noted. "But this seemed different. Less polished, more uncomfortable. Growth often happens in discomfort." Wayne nodded slowly. "He has a long road ahead. Trust is rebuilt slowly, if at all." "One thing's certain," Claire said, folding the check carefully and returning it to the envelope. "We've all changed because of what happened. Maybe even for the better in some ways." Her words carried profound truth. The painful experience had indeed transformed each of us. Wayne had found the courage to confront his son's behavior and reclaim his business with new purpose. Claire had emerged stronger, more discerning, unwilling to compromise on honesty in any area of her life. And I had developed an unexpected friendship with Wayne, a connection forged in the shared concern for Claire's well-being. 6 months after the wedding, that wasn't life had developed new rhythms. Claire had thrived in her promotion, leading her marketing team with confidence and creativity. Wayne had successfully relaunched Harrington's Prime as a respected neighborhood institution, embracing its identity rather than chasing impossible aspirations. My latest review of the restaurant, conducted anonymously and with rigorous professional standards, had awarded them a solid 4 stars, noting significant improvements across all aspects of the dining experience. One Sunday afternoon, Claire came over to help me organize Elizabeth's old recipe collection, a project we'd been meaning to tackle for years. "Look at this," she laughed, holding up a yellowed index card. "Mom's first attempt at coq au vin." She wrote "never again" across the top. I smiled at the memory. She was so frustrated that day, but she kept trying until she mastered it. We worked companionably, sorting recipes into categories, Claire occasionally setting one aside to try herself. Her interest in cooking had rekindled recently, another unexpected gift from the challenging past year. Wayne mentioned Blake might move back to San Francisco, she said casually as she labeled a folder of dessert recipes. "Not to work at the restaurant, something in corporate finance downtown." "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. She considered the question. "Okay, actually. San Francisco is big enough for both of us. And it would be good for Wayne, I think. He misses his son despite everything." "And do you miss Blake?" Claire shook her head. "Not Blake himself. Sometimes I miss who I thought he was, or the future I had imagined. But that was a fantasy." She smiled reflectively. "I prefer reality now, even when it's complicated." "A critic's daughter, indeed," I observed with pride. Later that evening, after Claire had gone home with a stack of her mother's recipes to try, I found myself thinking about the journey we had all taken. The professional boundaries I had always maintained between my personal life and my work as a critic had blurred and shifted. My review of Harrington's Prime had been both professionally sound and profoundly personal, changing the course of my daughter's life and my own. I opened my laptop and began writing not a restaurant review this time, but a different kind of reflection. The most meaningful evaluations we make in life aren't of food or wine or ambiance, but of character, our own and others. Like a skilled chef discerning quality ingredients, we must learn to recognize authenticity to distinguish genuine flavor from artificial enhancement. Sometimes the most valuable critical faculty is knowing when to trust, when to question, and when to walk away from the table altogether. In restaurants and in relationships, the same principle applies. What matters most is not the elaborate presentation or the grand promises, but the fundamental integrity of what's being offered. The truth will always reveal itself eventually, whether in a disappointing first bite or a gradually unfolding deception. The most important review I ever wrote wasn't published in any newspaper or website. It was the honest assessment I offered my daughter when she needed it most, an evaluation based not on stars or scores, but on the enduring standards of honesty, respect, and genuine care. We are all critics in our own lives, constantly making judgments and assessments. The question is whether we have the courage to acknowledge what we discover, even when the truth is unappetizing. even when it means sending back what we've been served and leaving the table hungry but dignified. Because sometimes the meal we thought we wanted isn't the nourishment we truly need. And sometimes walking away from a carefully plated deception is the first step toward a more authentic feast. I saved the document not for publication, but for Claire, a gift for some future moment when she might need to be reminded of her own strength and discernment. The next morning, I received an email from Wayne with the subject line, "Good news." Harrington's Prime had been selected for inclusion in a prestigious dining guide specifically noted for its remarkable transformation and commitment to authentic quality. Attached was a photo of the staff celebrating their faces alight with pride and genuine camaraderie. I smiled at the image, particularly at Wayne standing in the center with Miguel, both men looking not just happy, but peaceful, the hard-won serenity that comes from doing honest work with integrity. My phone rang Claire calling to share her weekend plans. "I'm trying Mom's bouillabaisse recipe tonight," she announced. "Want to be my test subject?" "I'd be honored," I replied warmly. "Fair warning, I expect an honest review. No sugarcoating if it's terrible." I laughed, recognizing the echo of my own professional ethos in her words. Complete honesty always, with appropriate kindness. "That's all anyone can ask for," she agreed. "See you at 7. I'll bring the wine." After we hung up, I gazed out my window at the San Francisco fog rolling in across the bay. The past year had been a journey through complex emotional territory, from the bitter disappointment of Blake's deceptions to the expensive cost of confronting difficult truths. But now finally we had arrived at something sweet, not the cloying artificial sweetness of comforting lies, but the complex authentic sweetness of honest relationships in genuine connection. Like any good meal, the experience had been about more than just the individual components. It was about how they came together, how they balanced and complemented each other, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. The bitter, the expensive, the sweet, all necessary elements was in the full experience of living authentically. I closed my laptop and began planning which wine to bring to Claire's dinner. Something honest and unpretentious, I decided. Something with character and integrity that spoke for itself without flashy packaging or inflated claims. Because in wine, as in life, the true quality is always revealed in the tasting.